So now let's delve a little more into if statements and how to use if statements. So I've shown an example above. So if you use an if statement, again, you need to remember that it is followed by a condition, but it always ends in a colon. And because it ends in a colon, that means that the statement that follows it is going to have to be indented. And just make sure that this indentation is always the same again. It can't be, you can't use a tab once and then 4 spaces another time. So make sure that you set up your tab as 4 spaces, for example. You can look that up on how to do that depending on which IDE you use, but generally speaking the tab should be 4 spaces, so just stick to tab. Okay, so here's an example of, for example, me assigning a value 125 to a variable called number. This should be familiar to you. And then here comes an if statement. So if number, so this is the expression and this is the statement, and note it's following the rules. If this number is less than 100, print the gene is highly expressed. So again, this over here will produce a true or false, and this will only run or be executed if this produces a true. Otherwise, it will just skip to whatever is underneath here. So it won't print anything under that's indented. It will just go to some other code. So if you had other code over here that says print the statement was false, then it will just jump straight to whatever's not under this indentation. So whatever's in line with if, or if something is even further down the line. So you will see in this case now, only this will print. This won't print because this 125, so this produced a false. So you can see this was skipped, and then it just goes on to whatever else is part of your code. If I were to change this to 200, then you will see that both of these statements will print because this is now also true. Okay, so yeah, I hope that is clear. But this is really how we use conditionals, obviously, because this you can answer on your own. It's kind of useless. Why we normally use conditionals is because, like the example that I previously made, you would have a huge data set, like maybe a file with lots of lines in there, and you want to find something in that file, but it's so big that you can't actually do it manually. So you want the code to run through it because the code is more accurate and it can do it much faster than you can. So for example, here we have a list called accessions, and you've got a whole bunch of accession numbers in here, right? But as you can see, you can't see to the end of this. Is still a small list because you can scan and come through it, but you might have a huge list, like I said, that was maybe a whole lot of gene names taken from a VCF file that contains 4 million lines. So you've got 4 million genes in there. And you are looking to print, for example, all the accession numbers that starts with an A. So this is how you would normally use it when it's too big for you to do manual work. So for example, how you would do this is exactly the same. Again, this can be anything. This could be value, this could be bananas, this could be whatever's. It doesn't matter. This part matters because it's going to look for the variable name or the thing that it needs to look in. So this could be in file if you've opened a file. But in this case, we wanted to look inside this list. And whatever's in this list, remember, has not been defined. These elements in this list have not been defined. they've only been assigned to a list. So if you want to create or put each one of this in a variable name, you could, what we saw before, create a for loop. So you create a for loop and then you make up a variable name, which is going to, every time it goes and executes this and it comes back, because in a for loop, unless otherwise specified, it will take on each one of these values as it goes through the for loop. So in other words, accession would take on each one of these values. First this, then that, until it gets all the way to the end. It will take on each value until the end, unless you otherwise specify it. So, so this is a made-up name, and so it will say for this first accession in the list of accessions, if it starts with an A, print the accession. Now, obviously, it's going to go around, it's going to take on this and say, the first time around accession is AB56. If AB56 dot starts with A, print AB56. So it's going to print that. Then the second time it goes around and it says, okay, I'm not done. This list still has a lot of other elements in there, so I need to complete this. So it goes back up and it takes on this value. And it says, if BH86 in accession, for BH86 in accessions, if BH84, dot starts with A, print BH84. And so it goes on until the end. And you will see that because we specified that it must only print the accession when it starts with A, it will do that. So it's something that you will use a lot. You can, without even thinking about it for too long, you can see a whole lot of use cases for using conditionals, especially in the context of loops, such as for loops. Okay, yeah, this is just a little, this is for those who want to maybe do something a little more advanced. Say, for example, you wanted to also see at which position it is. You could, for example, use the enumerate, and then you can say for position or index. I use position because, again, like I said, you use variable names that make sense. For position, accession in enumerate accession. So enumerate will allow you to also extract the index or the position. Remember, this is index 0. This is index 2. And then I did the same thing, but because obviously the index here starts at 0, I just added position plus 1 so that I know that this is at number 1, number 2. But this is just, you might at some point want to know this information, so I'm just putting that in there so that this is something that you know does exist. And you can see here that this is quite accurate. If you look at A90, not quite it's accurate. If you look at AY93, it will be at 0, 1, 2, 3. But because we've said we want the position and not the index, the position in the way that we would, if you didn't know programming or coding, assume a position, this would be the 4th element in the list. So I added the +1 and it shows you that this is the 4th one. Okay, so that's just a nice handy little thing. I use that, I've had to use that quite a bit. This is maybe, you can't see a proper use case for this in this instance, but there will be times when using that enumerate is very essential. So just know that it exists. And again, I just put under here that accession is just a variable name that you can decide on. You could have used I don't care. If I don't care is in whatever, in the list accession over here, for example, this could have been I don't care. It doesn't matter what the variable name is there, because you're now defining it when you open the for loop. This is just an explanation that you can, let me just, remember I'm putting this up on the GitHub page, so if you want to read it, you can read that as well. You can also pause it if you want to read it here, but this is just me explaining exactly what I've explained before. but I think maybe one important thing would be this line over here, to note that there are two levels of indentation. So let's go back to the simple one. The for loop on its own has a colon, and then the if statement also ends in a colon. So you can see that because we started with a for loop, that has its indentation, and then if you start with the if loop in there, then that also has an indentation. So obviously you need to take that into account. So there's two levels of indentation over here. And then maybe just something to take note of. You can use many different conditions in Python. Python can handle any number of them, and even any number of indentation. But the general rule of thumb is that if you find yourself writing a piece of code that has more than 4 levels of indentation, it might generally indicate that you need to turn it into a function. And every time you introduce new indentation, you have to be really careful that you know how this loop and indentation works, because it can get confusing.